Okay. So welcome everyone, and welcome those who will be watching in the future. This is another in the series of webinars sponsored by the Sherman Park Eco Neighborhood Ambassadors and Sherman Park Community Association. And we're grateful for all the people who are working in our neighborhood and in the city of Milwaukee and beyond to create a better environment for all, a greener world. So this evening's webinar, we are going to be focused on two subjects. One is tree maintenance and an introduction to the Department of Natural Resources grant that we received here in Milwaukee. And Joe Fitzgerald and Eric Desautels from Milwaukee Water Commons are going to be sharing about tree maintenance. You're our tree guys, and very instrumental, Joe and Eric, both in the planting of trees on 45th and Center and over near Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church. And also, Joe last year, very helpful with maintaining the trees on the corner of 55th and Center next to the post office. So we really appreciate Joe and Eric's work in our community as our partners, our tree partners, our tree guides. So they're going to be sharing about tree maintenance and tree planting, and also about the tree grant and the next steps on our tree inventory. And we also are blessed to have Kevin Kane back with us again. Kevin is going to be giving us an update on the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act and the work of green homeowners in our neighborhood and in the city of Milwaukee. So great to have Kevin with us tonight as well. So we're just going to launch in, and again, we hope that if you watch this in the future, that you'll feel free to contact Joe and Eric if you have any questions related to trees, and contact Kevin at Green Homeowners if you have questions about how you can take advantage of some of the money that's out there and available to help improve the energy efficiency of your home and reduce your carbon footprint. So Joe and Eric, thank you for being here tonight, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tim and SPCA and the Eco Ambassadors for having us here tonight. And yeah, I'm gonna work on getting my tech set up here, but excited to share with you all a little bit about the Sherman Park Urban Forestry Grant and some of the progress. I know we've had a few different updates throughout the year, but then we will also be talking a bit tonight about the fall tree care strategies, things that you can do as things are getting colder, leaves are falling off the trees, and kind of how to prepare your trees for the winter and for the next year. So Eric and I both work with Milwaukee Water Commons. Wanted to start off here with just at least one introductory slide to Milwaukee Water Commons. Water Commons is a cross-city network that fosters connection, collaboration, and broad community leadership on behalf of our waters, promotes stewardship of equitable access to and shared decision-making for our common waters. I often say that what we're doing is connecting communities, neighborhoods around the city, using our relationship to water as a way to do that. And one of the projects that we've come to through our work with neighborhoods around Milwaukee and learning about water challenges that are important to Milwaukee residents. It's called the Branch Out Milwaukee campaign. And a big piece of that now is our work here in Sherman Park with the Sherman Park Urban Forestry Grant. Pictured here is one of the tree blessings, tree plantings that Tim mentioned here at the beginning of the call on 55th and Center, right near the post office. We have a number of partners on the grant that have been coming together to work with us here at the Sherman Park Community Association, the Eco Neighborhood Initiative, and the ambassadors. the City of Milwaukee Forestry Division, and the City of Milwaukee Environmental Collaboration Office. And I just wanted to, as we're kind of kicking off our presentation here today, just do a little bit of an update on how that project is going. And then we'll get into more of the tree care tips. So for folks who have joined calls in the past, or for folks who maybe are hearing about this project for the first time, this is a project focused specifically in the Sherman Park neighborhood on creating or doing more around tree maintenance in the neighborhood, trying to support maintenance of trees, and also trying to encourage more connections to resources for tree maintenance, tree care, tree planting, and also increase the number of trees in the neighborhood, and encourage residents to be thinking about trees and having hopefully creating a more positive relationship with trees here in Sherman Park as well. And the project has really 5 components to it, and I'm just going to give a little bit of a short update on each of these and then get a little bit deeper into one of them in specific. The first is tree planting on public lots. And so at the beginning of the year, around Arbor Day in April, and then a little bit after May as well, in May as well, we did 2 tree planting events in coordination with our partners and residents in the Sherman Park neighborhood. One was on 45th and Center on the corner there, and the other was on around 38th and Keefe in a healing space that is being managed by the Pilgrim Rest Missionary Baptist Church. And so those planting events were just really amazing experiences for us to be out there with folks planting those trees and to see those spaces coming together. And so that was a component of the project that was really earlier on in the year, but just a lot of success there in terms of seeing those spaces come together and having the maintenance and watering still going on throughout the year as well here. The second component I wanted to talk about is the assistance with tree maintenance. And so a number of folks who might see this call have connected with us for a few different components of the project, the inventory and things like that. We've come out to folks' properties to take a look at their trees, and people who had some risks with trees that were on their property were working with Hoppy Tree Care, which is a professional arborist company, to help subsidize some of the costs of having an arborist come and look at the trees on folks' properties, give an assessment of what it would take to manage those trees for storm damage, try to do some of the pruning, tree care, things that tree needs to be healthy and reduce risks to either property damage or storm damage, however. And then we're working to subsidize some of the costs for folks. It's really a goal of ours to be helping folks take on tree maintenance so that we can have, again, healthy relationships with trees in our neighborhoods, and then also healthy trees in our neighborhoods for all the benefits that they do bring. So we're working with 25 homeowners in Sherman Park right now that we've identified and are in the process of coordinating that maintenance right now here for the remainder of the year. The other piece that I want to talk about before I get into the inventory is the neighborhood tree board. And so another part of the project has been to help to organize a neighborhood level tree board, which is a group of residents in the Sherman Park neighborhood, living in the Sherman Park neighborhood, who are concerned about trees and canopy and can act as a decision-making group or a coordinating body here in the neighborhood to talk about trees and green spaces in Sherman Park, speak with folks like the city or the county, other partners, nonprofit organizations, and coordinate efforts to be, listening to neighbors and residents about their needs around trees, trying to create more or bring in more trees and green spaces into the neighborhood, guide the projects that we're working on, or just act as a liaison. So when decisions are made about trees and green spaces in Sherman Park, that residents are a part of those conversations, leading in those efforts, and helping to shape what the canopy looks like, and hopefully bring in the resources that folks need here in the neighborhood as well. So keep your eyes peeled for more news about the Sherman Park Neighborhood Tree Board. events that they're doing and things like that as well. But really excited to have an energized group of folks involved in that program, part of the program. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is the Sherman Park tree inventory. I'm going to skip here to the next slide to talk a little bit about that. For our grant, the tree inventory, and I just to talk a little bit more about what a tree inventory is. Tree inventory is kind of a record or an account of the trees that exist in a neighborhood. And so it is exactly that. It's an inventory of trees, their health, the general size of the tree, the type of tree. And for us, what we're doing is we're collecting information about the trees that exist on private property in Sherman Park, and then coordinating with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to add information about those trees to the Wisconsin Community Tree Map, which you can kind of see a little bit of a snapshot, at least here on the side of. But essentially what the value of a tree inventory is that it really having information about the trees in a given area can really help decision makers, shape their management practices around how are we looking at the urban forest, what trees do exist in our neighborhoods, and also to think about how to prioritize funding and resources and how to work in an area. So including information onto the Wisconsin Community Tree Map can help us to build a better base of understanding what trees exist in Sherman Park. And doing that specifically on private property is a huge plus, because we have folks like the City Forestry Division that do an awesome job of tracking the trees that exist on public property, the ones that you see out in front of your house near the street. But there's not really anybody who's taking a direct account of the trees on private property. And so that's a huge portion of our canopy that folks just are not really tracking with. And for us, it's also an opportunity to understand, where there are more or less trees in the city of Milwaukee, so that we can prioritize resources for tree planting, tree care, and things like that. And so I put a little note on here to let us know if you do have trees on your property, or even if you don't, and you're interested in us coming out to do an inventory to make an account of what trees do exist in the neighborhood. We'll have our contact information here at the end of the slideshow. And we really would love to hear from folks who are living in the Sherman Park neighborhood and get out to count trees. This is going to be an ongoing effort and a part of our program. I also want to talk a little bit about what a tree inventory looks like, so you kind of know what we're getting into, and also some of the reason that we're prioritizing this piece. And the reason is, for us, it is data, it is information that can help to shape the work that's happening, not just with our organization, but with other organizations, and how resources are distributed. But it's also a really cool chance for us to come out and meet you and learn more about your trees and your relationship with trees, and also to give something back to you as well, in terms of being a resource for questions that you have about the trees on your property, concerns you might have about maintenance needs, or things that you see growing and you're not sure what that is, or maybe you want to plant a tree on your property and you're looking for advice on what could go in the right place. What happens when you schedule an inventory with us, you reach out to the organization, and actually it'll likely be Eric who's going to speak after me, but Eric or another Water Commons staff would circle back with you to schedule time to be able to come and visit you at your house. And once we set up an appointment, we would then Eric would come and then visit you at your property. And the two of you or whoever's with you that day would walk around your yard, taking a look at the trees that are in your yard, or taking a look at open spaces that you're thinking about planting, or however. We'll go around, do the measurements of the trees, kind of look at the health of the trees as well, and make recommendations to you about the trees that do exist on your property, about any maintenance concerns, letting you know about plantable spaces. And then also the other thing that we're trying to do as a part of this as well, is get a record of folks' relationships with their trees, and try to learn more about the stories that we have with trees on our in our properties, in our lives. Um, you know, it's one thing to be able to show a map to folks that says these are the trees that exist in Sherman Park, these are the types, these are the general sizes and health. But it's another kind of capture, another kind of you know, it's important as well, I guess, to be capturing information about our relationships with trees, and to be thinking about the stories and connections that we have with trees and green spaces in the neighborhood. And so we want to also be able to represent that and tell the story of how Sherman Park residents are connecting with their green spaces. You know, I often, when I'm thinking about this part of the project, I'm thinking about you know, trees in my life that I grew up climbing on, that my brother grew up climbing on, that my niece and nephew now grew up climbing on. And it's, you know, that's an important story of why these green spaces are important, you know, important to us as well. And that's something we want to be able to share and think about also alongside the data. So once an inventory is completed, and I should also say the inventory is free, we will come and do this no charge. It ends with us bringing back the information that we got from your property, the conversations that we had, the questions you asked, the resources you were looking for. Eric writes up a really awesome report of that conversation, draws up a map of the property and shows you where the trees were that you talked about, where the planting spaces were that you were talking about, and types up the recommendations that he had with links and resources and things that you can be thinking about as well. This is also an opportunity, if you are interested in planting a tree, or if you have a tree that you know needs some maintenance, it's also an opportunity to get onto our list, so that when we as an organization have funds available to be giving trees to residents to plant, or if we have funds available to be helping folks with subsidizing maintenance costs, that we'll have you on our list to be the first one to call when that's available. So that's a little bit about the grant and kind of where we are. And encourage folks to give us a call if you're thinking about the inventory or interested in that. And I think at that point, I'm handing it over to Eric. Eric, if you need me to click on the slide, just let me know.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And thanks everyone for having us tonight. This is an awesome opportunity to talk about one of my favorite seasons and the stuff that you can do in order to keep your plants happy and healthy throughout the winter and looking great for next spring. So we'll start off with, you know, what season is it now? It's fall. And what does that mean is happening? Do next slide. Temperatures are getting cooler, leaves are dropping, days are getting shorter, and everybody's caching food for the winter. So squirrels, chipmunks, and trees too. So in fall, trees and shrubs are taking the time to move all that energy that they've spent this whole year generating through their leaves back into their roots so that they can use it again the next year. They're hardening off their wood and their buds so that they're better able to take those cold temperatures and those whipping winds that we have in Wisconsin throughout our winter. And they're making sure that they have enough moisture within all those tissues to last through winter with minimal damage. So next slide. So what does that mean that you can do? Well, knowing what's happening in fall to those plants means that we can kind of inform ourselves on actions that we can be taking to help them do what they know they need to be doing. So number one is going to be watering. And this is especially important for evergreens. So adequately watering your plants going into fall, especially this fall, considering that it's been fairly dry, is going to do a world of wonder for a lot of plants. Specifically junipers, arborvitae, if you have any like dwarf hemlocks out there, or fall cypress, all of those are going to benefit really well from getting adequate water in fall. Any newly planted plants will also benefit from that extra water because, again, it's like running a marathon. If you wait until halfway through the race to start drinking water, you're already a little bit late. But if you plan ahead and get some time to build up those levels, getting into the period of high stress, that's where you see some really good results. And plants aren't drinking in winter. They're dormant throughout the winter months. They're not photosynthesizing. They're not moving liquids or moisture throughout them. So what they have in fall, by the time that they have to stop transporting water and nutrients, is what they have. And they have to make that last the entire winter. And if it does dip below that threshold, they do start to die back and have winter damage on them. So another component of water for plants is adding a nice mulch ring or replenishing the ones that you've got. And in terms of the size of the mulch ring, the wider the better. Personally, if you can get it out to the drip line of the tree where the edge of the canopy is, that's fantastic. At the same time, not everyone wants to turn their entire yard into a mulch ring, so I get that. But at least a 6-foot wide mulch ring goes a long way. And lastly, another thing you can do, which was especially prevalent back during the 2019 polar vortex, is adding protection to your tree trunks and your shrubs too, if they've got thinner bark, to prevent damage from wildlife, whether that's like mice, voles, deer, if you live near like a parkway or where they're moving through the area. This will go a long way to preventing winter damage on your plants out there. I mean, deer aren't as big of a problem in Milwaukee as they are in like some of the surrounding suburbs and whatnot, but they're still out there, and it just takes one bad experience with a buck in order to mess up a tree for a pretty long time. So next slide. So when it comes to watering trees, the first question is, how do I water? Well, on the left side are 2 ways to not do it. So first off, a lawn sprinkler does not provide enough water for a tree to use. It all lands onto the surrounding turf and it evaporates off, or it barely penetrates the soil and is absorbed and then evapotranspirated off by the turf. Same thing goes for the lower photo. A watering can works if you fill it up like several times and use it, but just, pouring half a can onto a tree of that size is not going to do anything for that tree's long-term health. So the best ways that you can be watering, if you've got like the resources available to get them, a tree gator bag, like in the top right, is helpful. Otherwise, a soaker hose on the top left is also useful, that like slowly releases water into that soil. But if you don't have those, just a simple open hose end does a lot of work. And the way that we want to water trees is long, slow, and deep. So your hose shouldn't be kicking out full blast. It should be like barely a trickle, like a quarter open, if that, on your faucet. And you want to leave it near the base of the tree, probably like halfway across your mulch ring once you've got that installed, and kind of move that around every 10 minutes or so. Now, you don't have to be leaving the hose on your tree for 5 hours or anything crazy, but you do want to leave it on for a good maybe half hour, 45 minutes for your larger, older trees. For younger, new establishing plants, an amount of about 10 gallons per inch of trunk diameter per week is a really good guideline for how much water those plants need to get established. So if you've got, let's say, like a 2-inch tree that you had planted earlier this year, about 20 gallons a week works out really well. And in order to figure that out, you can put your hose in a 5-gallon bucket, time how long it takes to fill that up, and then just multiply that by, 2 times however many inches your tree is, because that'll give you how many units of 10 gallons you'll have to leave that hose out for in order to get to that level. If you have a 5-gallon bucket that's broken, or like, you're willing to put a hole in, that can also work out really well. If you take, like an 1/8-inch drill bit, you just poke some holes in the bottom of the bucket and you kind of can fill it up, let it drain, fill it up, let it drain. It's kind of like an easy homemade tree bag. But again, the important thing is that you want it to drain slowly into that soil, and you want it to really get down into those surrounding roots. So you're not watering like right on the trunk, but in that mulch ring area. So again, watering about 10 gallons per diameter inch for new trees is a really good guideline, and larger, older trees will also benefit from water. So you don't need to dump like, 50 gallons out there for a small evergreen or shrub, but you do want to make sure that the water gets a chance to get out there into the soil. Also important with that is actually checking the soil moisture. So if you've got mulch out there, you pull that back and you feel how wet the soil is down to a depth of about like 3-4 inches. You know, it's not just the top inch, it's fairly deep down, and you want to make sure that that water is really moving through that soil profile. If your water is all running off, then you're watering too fast, slow it down. If all of it's soaking in, great, but if it's not moving laterally into that soil, you'll have to be moving that hose around more. I know it sounds like it's like a fair bit of work, and I know that we're like at that time of the year where you can't really just be running the hose out here and there, but you know, if you can run it from the kitchen sink, or if you can run it from like a basement sink or something like that, those are really ideal. Or, you know, if you're able to get 5-gallon buckets, even just something, anything that you can do is going to be a really big help for any plants out there in time for winter when it comes to watering. Next slide. When it comes to mulching, the point of that is to kind of mimic the natural soil that we have growing like in Wisconsin forests where like all these trees came from. So in the woods, leaves fall, they land on the ground, branches and twigs fall down, bark falls off of dead trees, and you get this nice layer of organic material. We want to mimic that and do what we have on the right side image here, you know, have it be kind of even, you know, not really going up beyond where the root flare of that plant is. On the left side is what you'll see on a lot of commercial properties, and that's called volcano mulching, and that's bad. What that does is it traps moisture against the trunk, which introduces a lot of rot and decay. It's kind of the same idea of like if you were to go trudging through a bunch of puddles in your shoes and then you never took them off, your feet probably wouldn't be looking too good after even a day of that. So we want to keep that moisture away from the tree trunk and make sure that there's a good, you know, like couple inch or like, you know, the width of your fist away from the trunk where your mulch starts. Your mulch should also only be between like 2 and 4 inches thick. If you make it thicker than that, it'll actually form a layer that repels water. And you're back to the problem of not having enough water in your soil. But again, too short, too small, and it's not really doing anything. The other benefit of mulch is that it helps to like add organic material to that soil, which builds up its quality. It's kind of like taking a probiotic for your digestive tract. You want to have the right bacteria, the right stuff growing in there. And that's what wood mulch does, is it helps kind of inoculate your soil and keep it a healthy living thing so that all of these natural processes that generate nutrients for the tree are able to continue going on. But if it's just bare stone or if it's just bare dirt, nothing is happening in that soil. And so the tree isn't getting fed that way. Next slide. And then lastly, we've got trunk protection. So for like mice and voles, something that only goes up about 12 inches on the trunk is fine. For deer protection, you want to go up to about, 4 feet or at least to where the first branch starts on the plant. And you can do that by getting one of those spiral wraps. You can do it with like a corrugated piece of drain tile tubing. If you have one of those lying around, you can get chicken wire and make a fence around it. But really just something that provides like a barrier, keeping things from nibbling on the trunk, right? Or scraping on the trunk. What we want to avoid though is what's happening on this photo on the left here, which is a tree that was staked, but never had the ribbon removed. And trees will do that with any like material that you've wrapped around it that doesn't have enough give or can like expand with the plant. And, in general, avoid leaving things on your plant. When it comes to deer, for example, they're only having antlers like between Halloween and, Memorial Day. That's really the time of the year that they're able to do damage. Other than that, during the summer, there's plenty of food for plants or for insects and small mammals and larger animals in order like to eat in the surrounding landscape. So they don't really have to be going for these trees. This is kind of their like last resort food source in the winter. It's like boiling your shoes when you're trapped out in the wilderness. So it's not like they like love going for the bark, but if it's cold enough, they will go for it. So an animal eating that whole ring of bark around the base of the plant is a guaranteed way to kill it. So it's a simple thing you can do to prevent that damage from occurring and protect your tree investment. This isn't so much a problem on like bigger, older trees, especially those that have thicker bark on them, but thinner bark trees, younger plants in general tend to be more prone to it because their tissue's a little bit softer. It's not like they've got as thick of a bark on to protect them, and they're easy pickings for anything that might be hungry enough to pop on by. So next slide. So those are all things that are good for you to be doing in fall and watching out for. There's also some things that you should avoid doing in fall. One of those is fertilizing. And a lot of websites and a lot of resources say, oh yeah, fall fertilizing is great for trees. You know, it's like it helps the trees absorb more nutrients from the ground. The Haber-Bosch process to develop fertilizer was invented back in like the early 1900s. Trees have been around for tens of thousands, if not millions of years. So fertilizing trees is not really necessary if you've got healthy soil. The other thing is that on bigger, older trees, they don't really draw up that much like nutrients from the soil because they've got a lot of it locked into them. So when they're in fall and they're turning color, they're drawing those nutrients back in and storing them in their roots to reuse them again the next spring. So for fall fertilizing, it's something that like can be done, but like in general, I would avoid it. I would especially avoid it on evergreens because if you fertilize at the wrong time, you can cause them to start growing again. And that's really bad in winter because that new growth is not going to have any time to like seal itself off in time for those colder winter temperatures. The other thing you should avoid doing in fall is pruning, because like I said, when trees are changing colors, they're drawing those nutrients back into those roots. Well, if you cut those branches off before they get a chance to pull those nutrients out, it's a lot of wasted effort on that plant's part in the landscape. So we don't want to like cut that off prematurely. Like a really good time to prune is like kind of the middle of winter when all the movement of the sap and nutrients is completely done. And you're also like avoiding insects jumping around, spreading diseases to newly cut trees. So once all the leaves are gone and we've had like a couple of good hard frosts, then you can start, doing your pruning. But I would avoid doing it before that. Another note is to avoid pruning anything that flowers in earlier spring in fall, because by doing that, you're cutting off all of your flower buds. And this is especially prevalent on lilac bushes, on forsythias, for like magnolias and crab apples, because all of these plants get their flower buds ready to go this year so that they can open them up next spring. Well, if you cut them off, they're not going to open up and you're going to have to wait till the following year. When I used to work at a nursery, I would have people that would come in and say, my lilac hasn't bloomed since I got it. It's like, well, when are you pruning it? Well, in December. It's like, well, there you go. You're not going to have flower buds on it if you keep cutting them off that time of the year. So in general, avoid pruning stuff in fall, avoid fertilizing trees in fall. Next slide. There are also some things that I don't really recommend doing unless you have a reason for it. Like it shouldn't just be done because. It should be done because you have a specific reason you want to do it. So one thing that I see a lot of people do is rake their leaves, collect them in bags, or, rake them into the street. Well, like we said earlier, when trees grow naturally in the forest, they're constantly dropping those old leaves that have the nutrients they couldn't suck out of them back onto that forest floor. If you're always raking up those leaves, that's a net loss in nutrients in the soil. So if you can use like a mulching mower to kind of like rake those leaves or to churn those leaves into the turf, or if you can run them over with like a mower with a bag on it and then kind of dump that around the tree base, that'll do a lot of work for it. And that will avoid the need for you to use fertilizing. Because again, the big point of fertilizing is like, oh, you're replacing the nutrients the tree lost. And it's like, well, if the tree sucked in as much as it could and then dropped the rest of it on the ground to be broken down so that they can eat it again, you don't need to fertilize. So fertilizing kind of like solves a problem that's created by the way that we want to maintain our landscapes. Now, at the same time, there are some diseases that do hang out on leaves and they bounce from those leaves back onto the tree every year. When that's the case, and you have like a significant amount of that on your plants where they're constantly getting defoliated by the end of the season, you'll want to rake the leaves. You'll want to either burn them or get them off site. You don't want to be composting them in your yard. You want to be like removing them so that they're not reinfecting your tree. Again, going back to the people analogy, if you have athletes, when you spend all this time treating it and then you just keep putting on the same old dirty socks over and over again, it's not really going to go away. So we want to make sure that if you do have a disease hanging out on your leaves, you're removing those from the site and you're having the tree treated for that. Another thing to really be cautious about in fall is insecticide treatment. So there are like websites and resources that say, oh yeah, like you should treat your tree for, insect damage in fall, and like get that systemic insecticide into them, that's not a good like strategy. That's like waking up every day and taking an antibiotic so you don't get sick. Like you're going to be doing way more harm than good and damaging everything else around you by doing that. So the only times that like insecticide treatments on trees are really justified in my mind are when like they're preventing the plant's death due to an insect. So like if you're treating an ash tree for emerald ash borer, that's a good use of an insecticide because that insect will kill the tree if it's allowed to like move in. But if you're just dumping like insecticides onto apple trees or onto service berries or other flowering plants, that insecticide gets in everything, including the flowers, which means that our pollinators end up dying when they come to eat the nectar and pollen off of those flowers. So only do it if you have a specific disease you're trying to treat or get rid of, but don't just do it willy-nilly because, oh, I read it somewhere, it says I should put insecticides on my tree. Like it's not something you should just be doing to like get some damage in. So next slide. So in summary, in fall, you want to be watering weekly if we're not having adequate rainfall. You want to make a mulch ring that's at least 6 feet wide at a 2 to 4 inch depth, not deeper than 4 inches. And you want to be protecting your trunks and stems from animals. You also want to avoid pruning and fertilizing your trees in fall because those are both like going to cause problems with the tree's nutrient management. Next slide. Now there's a couple of resources available for information. If you're curious about how to do the pruning on your shrubs, Johnson's Nursery has a really nice link to how to prune plants here. UW Extension's horticulture website also has a lot of great resources for homeowners on like plant healthcare. And the Madison Plant Disease and Diagnostic Clinic is also a phenomenal resource if your plants are looking sickly and you want to see some fact sheets about that. To have your plants diagnosed there is a fee associated, but getting the information off of their website is totally free. So that's also linked there for you. And then one last point on the next slide here. Plant healthcare is a multi-million-dollar industry, and it's a very easy upcharge and upsell for landscapers and arborists. There are products out there that are very beneficial for plant health, and there are others that are pretty darn close to snake oil. So when you're trying to figure out if you need to use a product on your plant in order to help it out, ask, is this really necessary? What are the risks associated with this treatment? Are there other options here? And what happens if we don't do anything? And I shamelessly stole these from like a list of questions you're supposed to ask your doctor, but the same rules apply in that it's very easy for an arborist to say, oh, cool, I can make $500 doing an emerald ash borer treatment. And all that involves is drilling a couple holes in the tree, setting some plugs in, and then just leaving it be. Emerald ash borer is bad. We do want to treat for that, but there's a lot of stuff too where like prices can get added up really quickly. And people are just recommending it out of an abundance of caution rather than like an actual, like the tree needs this in order to stay healthy. So, fertilizing services, for example, great way to get repeat business from people. Also, you could do the same thing by doing mulch ring installations, but fertilizing is more profitable for a business. So that's why they recommend that. Just something to think about as you're like reading and doing your own research online. Just be aware of like, if you're reading it from an arborist or if you're reading it from like, a big tree care company or from like a Scott's Miracle Grow turf instructions website, like they have a financial incentive in order to get you to spend money on their product. So with that, that's all I've got. If there are questions, please let us know.
Joe, that's great. And Eric, thanks so much. Wonderful information, both about the grant and its impact on our community and all the great information that's available to people through the two of you. And inviting people to come and do a tree inventory. You'll benefit from meeting with Eric, and he can continue to educate us all. So because of time, we're going to move on to Kevin. But yeah, those who may be watching this in the future, please call on Eric and Joe and have your trees inventoried. And you can ask some questions of Eric when he comes out to do that inventory. And we'll hopefully find other ways of getting the information out as well beyond this webinar. So we give thanks for the work of Milwaukee Water Commons and the partnership that we've had. And we continue to look forward to planting more trees and helping our trees become even healthier. And so thanks for contributing to the greening of Sherman Park. We appreciate it. Thanks to both of you. So we'll move on to Kevin and an update on the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act. And Kevin has been doing the research and staying up to date on what's going on. So Kevin, thanks a lot for sharing with us tonight.
Thanks for having me on. So I'm Kevin Can at Green Homeowners United. We're excited to help people fight climate change at home and find out all the different ways that they can go ahead doing so. And with the new Inflation Reduction Act, we have a lot of opportunities to help people save money and help the planet at the same time. And so I'm fresh off a recent conference where we had policymakers going through this right away. We had people from the Wisconsin Public Service Commission meeting with us at our office not that long ago. We are trying to be as plugged in as possible to let people know what is in it. It's a huge law, but admittedly, it only just passed like 2 months ago. So it's not that surprising that we just don't yet know what some of the timelines are for some of the benefits. So I know we'll look back at this someday and say, you know, no big deal. But right now, it's people want to know, and I don't blame them. There's a lot of important stuff. So quick overview, Green Homeowners United, we help work on homes and buildings all over the place to help people fight climate change from home. This whole work got started because of research that upgrading homes to fight climate change or to cut carbon emissions, energy efficiency. It's one of the most important things we can do. And so toward that, one of the things that we're all going to have to do if we have not already is to get an energy assessment, sometimes called energy audits, where we look at insulation level, identify air leaks, check mechanical efficiencies, check solar feasibility, examine windows, and recommend strategies to fix them. Unfortunately, those who we've done energy assessments before, we may have to do another one. Unfortunately, the rules for what counts has changed in some cases. So we found that one out, but that's okay. We often use a special calibrated fan called a blower door to measure how drafty a home is. And we'll provide you a list of how much each improvement's expected to save. One of the benefits is now it can unlock new special rebates and tax credits, which are pretty cool. So there are 5 major parts for building owners. Just like the last time I talked about this, there is a homes rebate, which requires energy audits, energy assessments. This will kick in next year now. Electrification rebates for heat pumps, also sometime next year. Solar renewable tax credit for solar panels and the like, that is this year. That is right now, in fact. An energy efficiency tax credit that we'll get on our taxes for 2023 starts January 1st, as does a commercial energy tax deduction to do big improvements to commercial buildings, also starts January 1st. Unrelated, but we have a grant right now to help those over 60 with a disability or a veteran who are below a certain income insulate and air seal their attic. That has been approved. We are now good to go. Let you know who we're looking for this, but we can help people right now. We just have to find them. So homes rebate, it is technically available now, but we do not 100% know when the funds will come. If we can show you how to reduce your utility bill by 20% or more in that energy assessment, you will get a $2,000 rebate to immediately reduce the bill, or $4,000 if it's below a certain income. If we can show you how to reduce your utility bill by 35% or more, you will get a $4,000 rebate to immediately reduce the bill, or $8,000 if you're below a certain income. However, you must get an energy assessment by a trained energy assessor to qualify for this. So what it's really doing is the federal government is really urging people to go deeper in their own home, not just one thing, but to do a lot of things that help cut emissions and reduce utility bills and incentivizing us for that. So we've done a lot of research. What reduces it by 20%? What reduces it by 35%? Well, while every home is different, we've identified the home improvements most likely to reduce utility bills by the most amount. What should I be prioritizing? Well, it should start with air sealing and insulating the attic, unless it's partially or fully done already. It should be replacing furnaces that are more than 25 years old, sealing and insulating the metal ductwork as needed. It should be replacing electric water heaters with heat pump water heaters, which we'll talk about later. Adding rigid insulation to bare basement walls and rim joists. This one doesn't get as much attention, but it is a huge heat loss area. Drill and fill insulation to what's called dense pack in above ground walls when there is nothing there now. If there is something in your walls now, I wouldn't prioritize this. But for those that have nothing, it can be huge. And replacing fuel oil heating systems with natural gas furnaces or boilers or a heat pump. I still find people on fuel oil in the city of Milwaukee where they have the giant tanks in the basement. They have people come and they ship in a giant tanker fuel oil to the home. It's extremely expensive, bad for the environment. This is a slam dunk if we can find people with these fuel oil systems. I have found people in Sherman Park that still have them. Or solar panels, or some combination of the above. And so what you see in the corner is actually a picture of the new type of basement wall insulation that we use. This is not drywall. This is not like the old way of doing it where you had to cover it with drywall. We are putting white, rigid insulation that resembles drywall directly on the wall, sealing it to keep air from condensing on the back wall, cutting it around wires and pipes and windows, and making the basement look brighter, feel warmer, become drier, and all at the fraction of the cost and time it takes to finish a basement. We can do this in about 3 to 4 days, where finishing a basement usually takes a month. So it's kind of a big transition that we can do to help a lot of older homes. Here's the thing. It is usually not windows, air conditioners, doors, water heaters, light bulbs, or new appliances alone. I'm not saying these things don't matter. I'm saying that doing these, it's a longer road to get to 20% reduction in your energy use. So start with the stuff above. You'll get to it faster. Bigger bang for the buck. So I'll give you an example. This is a home that we did an energy assessment for in the Harambe neighborhood. And the report suggested that if we upgraded their thermostat, if we upgraded their lighting, we insulated their attic had a fair amount of it already, seal the leaks around the house, and wrap the water heater tank and pipes, that we would save about 20%. You can see a little arrow there, 22% on their utility bills. This, what we've done in many homes, would get this person a $2,000 rebate off the cost of doing so, or $4,000 if they were below a certain income. So not bad. However, this alone is not getting this individual to a 35% reduction. What would? Well, throwing in insulating basements. It's a larger expense, certainly, but it also is more energy saving than anything else on the list so far. This particular person's basement rode up a few feet above ground. It was very cold and also happened to be the source of where a lot of mice and rats had been entering the home. And so we were able to seal that too at the same time. But combined, now you're seeing that we're hitting that 37% energy savings for this home. This homeowner will qualify for $8,000 off the work under the new Inflation Reduction Act because we went deeper than we might have organically gone or automatically gone. And so we're really going to try to find the things that have the bigger impact on your utility bills, not just to save money, but to access you more funds. So the big reason why we keep talking about basements is that for years, low-income weatherization programs like those administered by Social Development Commission, as well as Focus on Energy, they have focused on incentivizing contractors to do attics. And we've done so much work in people's attics that most of our homes look like this, where insulated on the top, but pretty cold on the bottom. So honestly, we're going to save more money and energy covering up the bottom half of most of our homes than we are trying to put another hat on this guy's head. Not to shame this guy, but it's something that we keep seeing over and over again. Or I know people are going to say, well, what about windows? I thought windows would save a lot of money. A lot of window sales people will say, hey, upgrading your windows will save 50% on your heating bill. No, they won't. And I'll give you an example. Do you think the new windows that they installed on this building are going to have a huge impact on this home's utility bills? This house, this building, was on 5th and Walnut, and I had to pull the car over to take a picture of this. My favorite is the fact that this window over here does not even fit in the window gap. There you go. So obviously they're hopefully going to be doing a little more in this house, but as you can see, a lot of old houses underneath the siding, there's areas for air and heat to leak in and out. And so we have to do all sorts of things in the home. Windows alone are not sufficient. They don't even make up the majority of the square footage of the building. All right, other rebate, the electrification rebate. It is designed to get us off natural gas and propane or fuel oil in favor of electric. Up to $8,000 for a heat pump to replace air conditioners. Imagine an air conditioner that can also heat the home. Up to $7,550 for a heat pump water heater pictured above. More for electrical rewiring, heat pump dryers, electric ovens, and more. What's really fascinating is the heat pump, the first one, the $8,000 off, the heat pump air conditioners. In moderate and low income homes, unless the rules change, and we're waiting to find out, this will generally come in at no or low cost to moderate income homeowners. This is a gigantic change that means that we'll be able to electrify thousands of homes affordably for lots and lots of people who need it the most. Homes that maybe don't even have air conditioning right now. So it's going to be a pretty big change, but we are just waiting for what it is. And we want to make sure that, you know, people are aware what goes into it and all that sort of thing. But it's huge. So every person who is below a certain income currently can get this heat pump covered 100%, so long as it's this amount or less. So again, if you earn less than this number right here, this was known as 80% of the annual median income, you can get the heat pump 100% paid for by the new rebate, so long as it is less than the rebate. Or you can get the majority of it paid for if it's over. If they are at below what's called 150% of the median income, so this number here, depending on how many people live in their home, they can get up to 50% of the heat pump covered, up to $8,000, and 50% of the insulation, HVAC, air sealing, etc., up to $4,000. So they can get a lot of funds to make their home more energy efficient. If they're below this 80 number again, 80%, 100% of the heat pump can be covered, up to $8,000. 80% of the insulation, HVAC, and air sealing work, up to $8,000, can now be covered. So, like, I'm going to be, you know, recommending that neighborhood improvement districts and state programs and others look at, hey, maybe we can cover that 20% so that we unlock 5 times as much money as we're putting in to upgrade these homes, to leverage more money in the homes that we want to work on. So this is going to be a lot happening in the very near future. However, the downside is we don't know when this kicks in. The best information we are told is it might be a year from now, like 12 months. So this is going to be a bit. We don't know. We're going to do our very best to keep on it, and we may have ways to help people sign up early so that the moment it's ready, they're good to go, ordering the materials early. But we still have to figure that out. However, the energy efficiency tax credit is now clear. We know that January 1st, this will kick in. It used to be a one-time minor tax credit for energy efficiency improvements with a lifetime cap of $500. It has been increased and is now made annual. So starting January 1st, 30% of what you pay for energy efficiency improvements to a max of $1,200 will be a tax credit. Unless it's a heat pump, then you can get a $2,000 tax credit. You don't get these until tax time, but it's still pretty good. Windows, furnace, air conditioner, boiler are now capped at $600 max per year. So some people might actually want to do a couple windows each year for multiple years to get this tax credit every year. And on top of that, energy assessments now qualify you for $150 federal tax credit. So just getting an energy assessment is beneficial. All right, commercial tax credit. New increased tax deduction for commercial businesses starting in 2023. It's for businesses, multifamily buildings over 4 stories, etc. If an energy assessment of a commercial building is done and shown how to reduce utility bills, or excuse me, reduce energy use by 25% or more, you can get a commercial tax deduction of up to $1 per square foot in the year done. That's okay. I mean, a 10,000 square foot building could get a $10,000 tax deduction. However, if the company that we hire to do the work offers good wages, what are called prevailing wages, and apprenticeship rules, then is up to $5 per square foot, meaning a 25,000 square foot building could get $125,000 same year tax deduction for doing things like heating systems, insulation, and lighting. So this is now a strong incentive for companies to hire firms that are training and paying workers well, which is huge. And we are considering offering these. So if you have a commercial property and want this, let us know. Our union workers meet the wage and apprenticeship rules. We mostly work on homes, but many commercial buildings are in homes or buildings that are designed to be homes. And so, commercial buildings could very well, be upgraded in much the same way. And so we're going to try to figure out how our local businesses, however large they are, can take advantage of these things because there's a pretty good tax deduction now for them. So I'll give you an example. A family of 4 who earns $60,000 a year gets an energy assessment of the home. The energy assessor shows that insulation in the attic and air sealing the home, insulating the basement, and upgrading the furnace would reduce the utility bills by 35%. They would get $8,000 off those improvements immediately. They would also get a new heat pump to replace the old air conditioner effectively free. And they could also qualify for a tax credit of $2,000. It's a lot of incentive for this family. Example 2, an 8,000 square foot restaurant decides to get an energy assessment for their commercial building. That could be 8,000 upstairs and downstairs if there's a basement. They decide to upgrade their heating system, insulation, lighting, and windows, which would reduce their energy use 50%. They hire a company that pays prevailing wage and apprenticeship standards. The restaurant will qualify for approximately $40,000 federal tax deduction in the year they had the improvements installed. This is actually a typo. It's the year after. Long story, but a year after you do the work, we have to see what the improvements actually saved them, and then they get the tax deduction. So small typo. Example 3, an owner of a 5-unit apartment building with tenants of not low income, just, middle income tenants, gets an energy assessment and wants to replace furnaces, insulate the attic, and the basements to reduce utility bills by 35%. They would get a $4,000 per unit in instant rebates or $20,000 off the improvements. It's a lot of incentive for a multifamily building. If the apartment has more low or moderate income tenants, that rebate amount is then $8,000 per unit or $40,000 total. These aren't tax deductions. They're not tax credits. They're instant reductions off the cost of the work. So suddenly the landlord might only be paying, a fraction of that. It's kind of amazing. All right, example 4, a homeowning couple who earns $37,000 in Milwaukee County and is either over 60 or has a disability. Not even both of them, just one of them. They want their attic insulated and their house made less drafty to save energy and make it more comfortable. Well, here's the good news. They can now get it at no cost, as well as some small home repairs, thanks to a grant that we have from the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, together with Revitalize Milwaukee. The income changes depending on how many people live there. But so long as they have a disability, over 60, or are a veteran and are below the income, we can upgrade this. Call us at that number in the top right corner to see if you want to sign up. You can also sign up on our website. I will have a new flyer very, very soon, I promise, so that we can tell our friends and neighbors. However, the rules are they must not be in foreclosure or bankruptcy. They must have lived in the home for 5 or more years. The roof must not be leaking. The house cannot already have been weatherized, and they must be up to date on their property taxes. First come, first serve. We can only do 50 homes with us this time, although they may allow us to do more next year. But still, why not 50 homes in your area, city? So our recommendations, there is a lot that we know, there's a lot that we don't know as far as when the rebates are coming. So what should people do right now as of October 20th, 2022? What should we be doing right now? Here's our recommendations. If you need windows replaced, they're broken, they have lead paint, whatever the case is, consider ordering them sooner to be replaced in 2023, because then you can max out that $600 per year tax credit for windows. Again, ordering more than 4 to 6, you're still only going to get $600. And windows are not one of the biggest energy saving things in the home. But if you were thinking of doing it, you can, max out a tax credit early. It's just you won't get a rebate for it. Get an energy assessment soon. They start at $350 and they go up depending on how in depth you want to go. But once you have an energy assessment, it can unlock the rebates for you when they are ready and help you determine which improvements make sense now. So getting this is something you can do in the meantime to know how to use those funds when they're there. If you are thinking of replacing a furnace or an air conditioner, but it's not urgent, maybe wait 12 to 18 months for the heat pump rebates to kick in. They're very substantial, and heat pumps might replace the need to get an air conditioner. Or if you have a heat pump, you might still use the furnace, but a lot less than you were before. And so the rebates can mean that that current furnace you have, it can extend longer, or you may not need to use it as much. And heat pumps are just better at being air conditioners too. So don't get a new AC, wait for this, if you can. Also, lastly, I'll say this, consider having your basement walls insulated. We see this a lot in Milwaukee homes. All new homes built in Wisconsin are required to have insulated basements, but most old homes don't. Doing so can save money, expand living space in the home, and make the house feel warmer. You will often help unlock the $4,000, possibly more, rebates that can then pay off the cost for other things like a new furnace, insulating the attic, or a few windows when the rebates are available. And we've been talking to Summit Credit Union because they have this ME2 green financing tool for City of Milwaukee residents only that they did with the City of Milwaukee ECOS program to help figure out how to do this so that homeowners can sign up now, purchase the materials or order them so they're not waiting forever for them to arrive. And then the moment the rebates are good to go, we can have boots on the ground and people upgrading your home so that you are first in line to get these rebates. Basement walls are probably one of the more common high impact things that still need to be done in most homes. And so this is what I might suggest. Additionally, we are going to explore, can we try to sign up a bunch of people to be ready to go so that we can train and hire and get workers ready for this. This is going to be a massive increase in the amount of work to be done in residential work, residential energy efficiency. And so we want to train a lot of people, but we also don't want to sit on our hands while we're waiting. We want to prepare and get people ready. And so we're just sort of, waiting to see what the timeline is. But in the meantime, people can kind of keep this in mind. So I will, for the sake of time, leave it at that. And I know we have a little bit of time left, I think. So if people have questions, I welcome them. Otherwise, please reach out to us about the grant, about the rebates, about getting an energy assessment, about what they should do. But these funds exist for 10 years or whenever they run out, whichever is first. And so while you don't have to make an immediate decision, of course, it can't hurt to be prepared for whatever it would take to make sure that we're ready. So with that, I will stop.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, for all the research you've been doing and for the good work of Green Homeowners United. Really appreciate it. So we do have some time for some questions for Kevin, and let's allot some time if there were some tree questions, because we have more time than I expected we would. So we have our tree ambassadors, Steve and Lauren and myself on board, and Mabel Lamb and Jermaine Alexander from SPCA. And Joe and Eric, you may have some questions for Kevin, and Kevin, you may have some questions for Joe and Eric. So let's ask some questions that pertain to our own lives, which might also impact others. And then we'll connect people with Eric and Joe and Kevin through flyers and other information and through this webinar. So questions for Kevin, Joe, or Eric? Steve, unmute yourself.
There we go. Kevin, is there money allotted per state, or is this a federal, the whole shooting match?
It appears to be money tentatively allocated by state, but if a state doesn't use it up in a certain time, then it can go to another state that has.
Okay. Okay. And when will we find that out? Lord knows, eh?
Hard to say.
It's the government.
So
sometime next year.
Kevin, Kevin, for those who have had recent energy assessments, how you mentioned that some people may have to have energy assessments done again. So for example, my family, Bonnie and I had ours done, what, a year and a half ago. Do we need to have who needs to have an energy assessment done again if they've already had an energy assessment?
So the program that we built to do the energy modeling, which we had stress tested with a whole bunch of other programs to make sure that it works and has always been accepted by Focus on Energy and others, doesn't count now because the federal law, which is nationwide, decided to pick a specific requirement. It had to be vetted by a larger national body. Ours never did because it was built locally. So there are only, I think, 4 modeling programs that count, and we now have to pay for it. So on a per home basis. So we have most of the data for your homes, but we may have to go back and collect a few more pieces of data that we didn't catch the first time. And we're probably going to have to ask people to pay $35 extra. Apologies. But that'll be the cost of using the new system to update your existing energy assessment, because they're looking for very, very specific things to count for these thousands of dollars in rebates.
Sure. So it's not hundreds of dollars. It's just an additional $35 if you've already had it done. Mm-hmm. Okay. Other questions? What about, somebody was mentioning the other day that they had signed up, they were on a waiting list for, they're intending to get a heat pump and they're on a list. Is that something we should be doing, putting our names on a list if we're seriously thinking about doing a heat pump? And you're suggesting now waiting and maybe potentially till next fall to actually get it installed.
Yeah, it's unclear when exactly they're coming. The state organization that is most likely to get the money is called the Office of Energy Innovation, which is housed in the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, the entity that regulates all the utilities. We met with them a little while ago, and they said, yes, you are correct. We are supposed to be all eligible for these funds now, but we are waiting for the Department of Energy to let us know. And we recommend that people do not go ahead and order the things now and tentatively have them installed, because what if the Department of Energy says, all right, moving forward from today, you can get it, and suddenly people are left out. So what we can do is kind of get a list of people who are tentatively appear to be within the income limits, and the moment we know, sign them up.
Okay. So will you help? Oh, Lauren, go ahead.
I think I know the answer to this, but since you've been reading a lot more, I figure it can't hurt to ask. Do you know anything if there's any incentives that will apply to metal roofs, since they do increase energy efficiency of a home, but aren't ever spelled out individually, generally?
There is a tax credit for getting a energy efficient roof that expires at the end of this year. So if anybody has done it already, they can get it. If they plan on doing it before the end of the year, they could, but moving forward, they are taking roof materials off the list.
What do they define as installed? Mine is supposedly being installed this year, but who knows when they're actually coming?
It has to be done.
Done.
For the year.
By 12/31?
Mm-hmm. The max of the tax credit, though, I think is $500.
That's the $500 one, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's not much for a metal roof.
And you also, that $500 would also partially be covered by the heat pump you had installed and the insulation you had, or most of the heat pump. So it's, yeah, right. you get a chunk of it.
$500 is $500. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Okay, so we will look forward to connecting green homeowners with the good work that Jermaine's doing with through SPCA and with our residents. So thanks, Kevin. Any questions related to trees? I have a couple, but does anybody else have any questions related to trees? Yeah, so you answered one of them around leaf raking. And because we've been talking about that in some of the circles around the Green Neighborhood Eco Program. And some people were suggesting that you not rake your leaves. And so Eric, you're suggesting that you mulch them and then creating that mulch ring around your tree. And you answered another question. We have an older tree and you've given us some suggestions about our tree. We need to create that mulch ring around, even though it's a well-established and older tree. It's still important to water it and to establish a mulch ring around it.
Yeah, I've never seen an unhappy tree with a mulch ring around it. A properly installed mulch ring, I should say. So never seen a tree be unhappy by that addition. And it can make a huge difference in some plants. If the leaves have been more yellow throughout the seasons than normal, adding that mulch ring could be the key to changing that. So
if you're not creating your own mulch, do you have a recommendation on a type of mulch that a homeowner should buy?
Yeah, so anything that's organic is ideal. So rubber mulch does not count. Stone mulch does not count. Those don't break down. They don't add anything to the soil. Like the only thing that they are like good for, and even then it's kind of tenuous, is like either retaining water in the case of the rubber mulch, or like, putting in some barrier to weeds in the case of the stone mulch. But even then, like you still have stuff that deposits on top of that and it ends up needing to get ripped out long-term anyways. But there's a lot of products out there. Like I said, like the plant healthcare industry is a multi-million-dollar industry. So everyone's trying to sell you the next best thing. There's like cocoa bean mulch, there's slash pine needle mulch, like getting trucked in from Florida or wherever. In my experience, bark mulch has been the best in terms of like being like a finely shredded product that like breaks down quickly and gives a good shot of energy to that soil. But wood chips are a close second. The problem with the wood chips is that they can kind of alter the nutrient balance. So they're better than nothing. But if you can like put down the wood chips with some leaf mulch or with some, bark mulch mixed in with it, that can help kind of make it more of a complete meal, if that makes sense, for the soil bacteria to be breaking down. But wood chips and bark mulch are both really good options. And I would say like prices have gone up on them, but I don't think you really need to be paying more than like 30, 35 bucks a yard for a good mulch product. And 1 yard of mulch will cover a 100 square foot area with new bed, or it'll do up to a 300 square foot area to like replenish a bed with another inch of mulch or so in there. So if you're trying to figure out the math, I also would recommend, like, if you can get a trailer and pick it up in bulk, that's usually significantly cheaper than buying the bagged stuff. So if you only have a small area to do, then bagged stuff is great. But if you're going to be doing several beds, like, it's a lot more cost effective to be getting it in bulk. And it also means that you're usually getting a more local product. So there's less impact on the environment from transportation and shipping and, all that jazz.
Washington Park is your place.
Yeah, Washington Park has that nice chip pile that the city puts there. So again, like chips are better than nothing, but like only doing chips can kind of mess with that nutrient ratio. So if you can be raking your leaves into that space, that's great. It balances it out perfectly. We're adding like bark mulch to it. So like leaves are free and the wood chips are free. So if you blend those together, like congratulations, you're basically doing freegan stuff for trees. So.
Great. I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but we didn't mention it. Is this a good time to plant a tree?
Oh, absolutely. Fall's great because, again, all those nutrients are getting stored down in those roots. Temperatures are cooler. Water needs are less than what they are during the growing season, and roots will continue to grow through that soil until the frost gets at them. So fall is a really low stress, great time to be planting. Plus, you don't get as sweaty because it's cooler out. So it's always a bonus.
Great. Anybody else have any last questions for Joe, Eric, and Kevin? Thank you so much for all the great information. Yeah, fantastic. And we'll do our best to get the word out and share this webinar with a larger group. And any other information that you want us to try to share with our neighbors, we'll do our best to get the word out, including that flyer that you're promising us, Kevin. But it sounds like, once we get that flyer out and we inform people about the opportunity that's now available and that will be available. And Eric gets out and does tree inventories and shares some of the vast information you have about trees. You are well rooted in the tree business, my friend. Thank you so much. And Joe, thank you for all your advocacy and all the good work you've been doing. Mabel wants to share on this webinar with some upcoming events, and hopefully we'll be able to get this information out to the broader community in varieties of ways.
Well, that's right.
All right. Well, good evening all again. I wanted to just give you a quick preview. This is the email that will be going out to the community tomorrow, just to remind people that Tuesday, October 25th is early voting through November 5th. We do have the locations on our website. We have a voting guide, so you can go there and look at those locations. One of them that's close to us is Midtown. So you can definitely go there to register to vote, also vote, and do that before the election on November 8th, which is coming up. Then also there is the first annual Sherman Park Harvest Fest coming up, hosted by the Park System and County Supervisor Marcelia Nicholson. It's this Saturday the 29th from 1 to 4 at Sherman Park. And here we go with our lovely tree inventory. We're still doing that. We do want to remind residents that you can sign up right here on this form at this link right here by October 30th, and have someone from the Water Commons come out to do a tree inventory for your home. And this is, again, part of the Branch Out Milwaukee program. Just wanted to also encourage you, when you do get this email, there is a reckless driving survey. We have a student from Clemson University who is doing some research and surveying around people who run red lights and speeding through the intersections in Sherman Park. So we are providing this as an opportunity for residents to give us some feedback by taking this 3-minute survey. And all you have to do is just click this link right here at the bottom. So anything you see in red, that's all you got to do. Of course, we do need election volunteers. The election, again, is coming up on Tuesday, November 8th. We do host the Mary Ryan Boys and Girls Club election site. We do have a 4-ward polling site, and we are expecting greater turnout in November for the election. If you would like to volunteer, please contact Deborah Ford by either these email address or phone number. And then finally, well, kind of sort of finally, there's another survey. We received a biking and hiking trail survey from Milwaukee County Parks. It's for the Northwest Trail Connections Plan. They also have a survey they would like for Sherman Park residents to provide some input by November 1st. So again, you would click this link and it'll take you straight to that survey. Last but not least, if you still need a yard sign, we still have them. You can pick one up at the Sherman Park Coffee Shop, also the community house that is right next door to Bethel Bethany Church, or you can come to the Sherman Park Community Association office. With that in mind, and just wrapping this up, we do always encourage people to become a member of Sherman Park Community Association. We'd love to have you, and that link is right here at the bottom. So please be on the lookout for this mailing. It will be available tomorrow, I think about noon. It'll pop up in your mailbox. So if you have any additional questions, please let me know. Tim, we can't hear you.
Thank you, Mabel.
You're
I'm
welcome.
looking at my calendar, and our next webinar is scheduled for the 3rd Thursday. We're trying to stay consistent with third Thursdays if possible. And November 17th at 6 o'clock is our next webinar, and Leah Holloway will be our primary speaker, talking about the Plastics Free Milwaukee program and how Sherman Park is seeking to become a lake-friendly neighborhood. And we're encouraging people to take the Plastics Free Pledge. We'll make that available to people, and there will be another yard sign available in the near future related to the plastics free movement. So, and we're also going to be talking about eco-friendly gifting and encouraging people to become green neighbors at that November webinar. There will not be a webinar in December. We'll take the holiday season off and we'll come back in January. So those who are watching this video in the comfort of your own home at your own time frame, if you have any webinars that you'd like us to consider doing in the future, please send an email off to Mabel at SPCA, and she'll get it to us at who are your green ambassadors, your Sherman Park Eco Neighborhood Green Ambassadors. So again, thanks to Joe and Eric, and Kevin had to depart, but we give thanks for our partners and all the ways we're collaborating together. Thank you all, and stay green.
Yes.
Amen. Bye-bye.